The wind howled through the jagged cliffs of Red Rock Canyon like 1,000 desperate voices, carrying dust and secrets that had lingered in the desert for decades. Joseline Mercer gripped the reins of her weary horse, her eyes narrowing against the grit that whipped across her face. At 30, she was strong, cautious, and fiercely independent, a woman who had survived more than most men in the harsh expanse of the Arizona Territory. Tonight, though, something felt different. A tension in the air, sharp and electric, made her skin prickle. She had been traveling from Tucson to the small settlement of Dry Creek, a town barely more than a scattering of wooden buildings clinging to the edge of the desert. Rumors had reached her ears about a gang of outlaws making the area dangerous, and though Joseline had always avoided confrontation, the message she carried demanded urgency, a letter from her late brother's old partner, warning her that something in Dry Creek had gone terribly wrong. She didn't fully understand yet, but instinct told her that whatever awaited her, it was more dangerous than anything she had faced before. The canyon narrowed as the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting long, blood-red shadows across the jagged rock formations. Joseline's horse snorted nervously. "Easy, girl," she whispered, patting the animal's neck. Her own heart raced. Somewhere ahead, among the rocks and scrub, she thought she saw a flicker of movement, a shadow too deliberate to be a trick of the wind. Suddenly, a horse thundered from a side trail, spurs clinking, and a figure emerged tall, broad-shouldered and draped in dust that shimmered like bronze in the dying light. He was a stranger, and yet there was something familiar about the way he carried himself: confidence, danger, and a weary wisdom. He slowed as he approached, his dark eyes scanning her with suspicion. "Evening," he said, voice low and gravelly. "Not often I see a lone woman out here after sundown." Joseline's hand hovered over the pistol at her hip, though she had little desire to use it unless she had to. "Evening," she replied cautiously. "Are you from Dry Creek?" The stranger shook his head. "Passing through?" "Name's Elias Kane. And you are?" "Joseline Mercer." She tried to gauge him, noticing the way the firelight from a nearby lantern glinted off the knife at his belt. "And passing through is usually a dangerous business around here." Elias offered a half-smile, dry and humorless. "Danger has a habit of finding everyone sooner or later." A sudden sound cut through the tension. A distant, high-pitched scream carried faintly on the wind. Joseline stiffened. "That came from the town," she whispered. Without thinking, she urged her horse forward. Elias followed, quick as a shadow, as they approached the wooden buildings that marked the outskirts of Dry Creek. The town looked abandoned, or nearly so. The saloon doors swung on creaking hinges. A few lanterns flickered inside, and dust covered the boardwalks like snow. Yet the echo of the scream lingered. Joseline's pulse pounded. She dismounted and crept toward the source, gun drawn. A figure stumbled into the street, clutching a bloody arm. Joseline caught the trembling woman in her arms. "It's okay," she said, steadying her. "You're safe now." "Outlaws?" "The Daniels gang," the woman whispered between shivers. "They took everyone." Her words faltered. "Please, help." Joseline's mind raced. The Daniels gang was notorious, a group of ruthless men who had terrorized the territory for years. If they were in Dry Creek, the town could be wiped out before sunrise. She glanced at Elias, who had silently taken a position by the saloon's entrance, scanning the shadows. "We need to find anyone who's left," he said quietly, "and figure out what they want." Joseline nodded, her jaw set. Together, they moved from building to building, finding the streets eerily quiet. Signs of struggle were everywhere: overturned tables, broken windows, footprints in the dust that led toward the canyon. And then they heard it, a faint, metallic clinking, like chains dragged across wood. They followed the sound to the back of the general store, where the wooden door had been broken open. Inside, two young boys huddled together, eyes wide with fear. "It's okay," Joseline said, kneeling beside them. "We won't hurt you." "Are you hurt?" The older boy shook his head, teeth chattering. They said they'd come back. With more men." Elias cursed under his breath. "They won't have to." He looked at Joseline. "We need a plan. They'll be back for the rest of the town and whoever's still hiding." Joseline's mind raced. The canyon offered natural cover, but it was also a trap if they were outnumbered. Yet she couldn't run. Not when people were trapped, terrified, and counting on her. She glanced at Elias, noting the hard lines of his face, the way he seemed to carry a weight of past battles in his eyes. They were both survivors, and for the moment, that made them allies. As the night deepened, they fortified the general store as best they could. Barricades of crates and shelves were stacked against the doors and windows. Elias cleaned and checked his revolvers, while Joseline tended to the injured woman and boys. Every sound outside a branch snapping. A distant howl made her heart leap, but she remained calm, deliberate. A rock for those who were too frightened to move. Hours passed, stretching into the dead of night. Silence fell, broken only by the occasional whisper or the soft groans of the wounded. Joseline felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. She thought of her brother, of the letter she had carried across the desert, warning her that Dry Creek was in danger. Now she understood why. The town had become a target, a trap for anyone trying to stand against the Daniels gang. "Joseline," Elias said quietly, breaking her reverie. "I've scouted the perimeter. They're camped on the ridge, maybe 20 strong. Heavily armed. We can't take them head on." Joseline clenched her fists. "Then we don't. We wait and we use the terrain. The canyon, ambushes, anything to level the odds." Elias nodded, impressed by her resolve. "You've got grit. I can respect that. But grit won't be enough if they come with firepower." The hours dragged on. The moon rose high, casting silver light across the canyon walls. Shadows danced like ghosts in the lantern glow. Joseline and Elias worked side by side, strategizing, sharing sparse rations, and keeping watch. Though strangers at first, a mutual respect began to form, an unspoken bond forged in danger and necessity. Then, just before the first light of dawn, movement flickered along the ridge. Figures emerged from the darkness, horses tethered, guns gleaming in the moonlight. The Daniels gang had returned, ready to finish what they had started. Joseline felt a cold clarity settle over her. This was no longer a fight for survival alone. It was a battle for the town, for the innocent lives hiding in its ruins, for every soul they could protect. She met Elias' eyes. "We stop them here," she said, voice steady. "No mercy, no hesitation." Elias nodded, a grim smile crossing his face. "Then let's make sure they regret ever coming to Dry Creek." The wind howled once more, carrying the scent of gunpowder, dust, and imminent violence. The first shot would decide everything, and there would be no turning back. Joseline Mercer had come to Dry Creek with nothing but a warning and a memory of her brother. But she would leave as the reckoning that changed the town forever, and as the sun began to rise, casting light on the jagged cliffs of Red Rock Canyon, a quiet determination settled over her. The Daniels gang would learn the meaning of resistance, and Dry Creek would not fall while she still drew breath. The sun had barely crested the jagged horizon when the first rifle shot rang out across Dry Creek. Joseline Mercer dropped to the dusty floor of the general store, heart hammering as Elias Kane flung himself beside her. The sharp crack of gunfire splintered wood and sent dust into the air, signaling that the Daniels gang was advancing from the ridge. "We can't hold them like this," Elias growled, eyes scanning the ridge for any advantage. "They've got numbers and they know the terrain." Joseline's fingers tightened on her revolver, the weight familiar and reassuring. "Then we use what we know," she replied, voice calm despite the adrenaline thrumming through her veins. "The canyon. The cover. We picked them off before they reached the town proper." Elias nodded, a grim expression settling on his face. "You think you can handle a few shots yourself?" "I think I have no choice," she said, rising carefully to peek through a gap in the boarded window. A handful of figures crested the ridge, rifles gleaming in the sunlight. They were moving deliberately, confident in their numbers. One of them, taller than the others and wearing a dust-stained coat, seemed to be the gang's leader. Elias's jaw tightened. "That's Lawson," he muttered. "Leader of the Daniels gang. Cold as winter and twice as dangerous." Joseline swallowed. She had heard stories of Lawson, how he'd taken towns, ambushed travelers, and disappeared into the desert like a ghost before justice could touch him. But stories were one thing. Facing him in the light of day was another. "Listen," Elias said, crouching beside her, "we'll split their attention. I'll draw the center, you flank from the east. Pick them off one by one. When the shots start, they won't know which way the danger's coming from." Joseline nodded, adrenaline sharpening her focus. She could feel the canyon around her, the jagged rocks, the dry riverbed, the sparse brush that offered both cover and treacherous footing. If they played their cards right, they could thin the gang's numbers before they even touched the town. Elias gave her a brief, tight nod and then disappeared out a side door, moving silently like a shadow across the dusty streets. Joseline watched him go, feeling a surge of respect and a strange flicker of connection she hadn't expected. Then she turned toward her own path, careful to stay low and hidden. The first shot came from Elias, sharp and precise. A figure tumbled from the ridge, the rest of the gang spinning toward the source, shouting curses. Joseline took aim at another, squeezing the trigger. The crack echoed, the figure slumping against a boulder. Her breaths came fast but controlled. Every shot counted. The gang realized quickly they were under attack from more than one direction. Chaos erupted as men scattered, trying to find cover behind rocks and scrub. Joseline moved with purpose, ducking behind a boulder, taking careful shots, and retreating before they could respond. Each movement felt like a dance with death, a deadly, precise rhythm that demanded attention, instinct, and courage. From her vantage point, Joseline could see Elias moving like a phantom, weaving in and out of sight, striking swiftly. When one of the gang attempted to flank him from the south, Joseline raised her rifle and sent the man tumbling into the dust. Elias glanced her way, giving a brief, approving nod before vanishing again into the rocks. Hours seemed to stretch in minutes. The sun climbed higher, burning the canyon with harsh light, and the air grew thick with dust and the acrid scent of gunpowder. Joseline's hands ached and her throat was dry, but she refused to falter. Every shot, every movement, brought them closer to survival. Then a shout rang out from the ridge. "Reinforcements!" Someone yelled, and Joseline's heart sank. More of Lawson's men were coming, and they were approaching fast. She ducked as a bullet smashed into the boulder beside her, sending chips of stone flying. Elias reappeared, eyes narrowed. "Change of plan," he shouted. "We draw them into the canyon, proper trap them between these walls. They'll have nowhere to run." Joseline didn't hesitate. She sprinted toward a narrow passage in the canyon wall, Elias covering her. The men of the Daniels gang followed, greed and fury driving them forward. They didn't realize they were stepping into a deadly corridor where every angle favored the defenders. The narrow canyon funneled the attackers, limiting their numbers and forcing them into direct lines of fire. Joseline took position behind a rock, her revolver ready, while Elias positioned himself on a higher ledge, giving him a commanding view. The first of the reinforcements stumbled into the trap. Joseline fired, the shot striking true. Elias followed, picking off another with deadly precision. The narrow walls echoed with the sounds of gunfire, shouts, and the scuffing of boots on rock and sand. In the midst of the chaos, Joseline noticed a figure struggling near the edge of the passage, a young boy from the town, trying to help an injured townsman crawl to safety. Without hesitation, she dove toward him, dragging him behind cover. "It's okay. Stay low," she commanded, her voice firm but steady. The boy's eyes were wide with terror, but he obeyed, trembling. Elias shouted from above, taking down 2 more attackers. "Keep moving," he yelled. "They can't see you from here." Joseline helped the boy to his feet and guided him toward a safer nook in the canyon. "You'll be fine," she said, though the truth was, none of them were entirely safe. The canyon was a dangerous place for both friend and foe, and every step required vigilance. Minutes passed like hours. The gang was dwindling, their numbers thinning as Elias and Joseline moved with deadly coordination. Finally, Lawson himself appeared, stepping into the canyon with a cold, measured calm that sent a chill down Joseline's spine. "You've caused enough trouble, little lady," Lawson sneered, rifle trained on her. "Step aside, or you'll regret it." Joseline's pulse raced, but she met his gaze without fear. "You'll have to get through us," she said, voice steady. Lawson's eyes flicked to Elias above. "And you," he spat. "I remember you. Thought you'd never leave the desert, Kane. Always a thorn in my side." Elias's hand rested on his revolver, eyes hard. "And I'll remain one as long as you breathe," he said. Lawson smirked and fired. Elias rolled aside, the bullet striking the rock with a spark of stone and powder. Joseline returned fire, catching Lawson in the shoulder. He hissed, staggering, and for a moment, the leader of the gang looked vulnerable, a rare crack in his usual impenetrable demeanor. But the fight wasn't over. Lawson drew his knife, advancing toward Joseline with lethal intent. She fired again, but ran out of bullets in the moment of truth. Heart pounding, she ducked to the side, narrowly avoiding the blade, and Elias leapt down from his perch, tackling Lawson to the ground. They struggled, fists and knife clashing, dust and sweat mixing into the chaos of the canyon. Joseline snatched another revolver from her belt and aimed carefully. "Now, Elias," she shouted. With a precise shot, she struck Lawson's hand, forcing him to release the knife. Elias seized the moment, pinning Lawson to the ground. The rest of the Daniels gang, seeing their leader defeated, began to scatter, some surrendering, others fleeing back toward the ridge. Elias kept a firm grip on Lawson, eyes blazing. "It's over," he growled. Joseline exhaled deeply, adrenaline still pumping through her veins. The canyon was quiet again, save for the shallow breaths of the townspeople, who had managed to find shelter and the occasional distant caw of a hawk circling above. Are you okay?" she asked the boy she had guided to safety. He nodded, too shaken to speak. She offered a small, reassuring smile, feeling the weight of exhaustion settle on her shoulders. Elias stood, dusting himself off. "You fought well," he said quietly. "Better than most men I've known." Joseline's lips twitched in a faint smile. "And you?" He gave a dry laugh. "Still alive. That's all that matters." For a long moment, they stood in silence, the canyon stretching around them like a monument to survival and determination. Joseline felt the enormity of what they had accomplished. Dry Creek was still standing, the townspeople still alive, and the Daniels gang had been repelled, at least for now. But she knew better than to believe it was truly over. Lawson would return, and the canyon, the town, and everyone in it would remain under threat. And somewhere in the desert, secrets still waited, hidden motives, buried truths, and dangers Joseline had yet to uncover. As the sun climbed higher, casting the first warm rays on the battered town, Joseline and Elias began rounding up survivors, tending to the wounded, and securing the streets. It was hard, grueling work, but they moved with purpose. For Joseline Mercer, the fight for Dry Creek was no longer just survival, it was justice. And for the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time: hope. The sun had burned high over Dry Creek by midday, casting a relentless heat over the scorched streets. The town bore the scars of the previous night's battle-splintered wood. Overturned wagons and the acrid scent of gunpowder still clung to the air. Joseline Mercer moved deliberately through the streets, her boots kicking up clouds of dust while Elias Kane followed close behind, scanning every shadow with the vigilance of a man who had fought too many battles to ever lower his guard. The townspeople were emerging from hiding, shaken but alive, their expressions a mixture of fear, relief, and curiosity. Joseline and Elias had spent the morning tending to the wounded, securing the town's perimeter and gathering information about the Daniels gang's movements. Yet despite the temporary reprieve, there was an unease in the air, something deeper than the immediate threat. "I don't like this," Elias muttered, his voice low as he leaned against the sun-warmed side of the saloon. "They didn't just attack the town. They were looking for something." Joseline wiped sweat from her brow and nodded. "I know. When I got the letter from my brother's old partner, it mentioned Dry Creek for a reason. There's something here. Something Lawson wants, and I intend to find out what it is before he returns." Elias's eyes darkened. "Be careful, Joseline. Curiosity can get a person killed faster than a bullet." She gave him a tight smile, but there was no teasing in her gaze. "I've survived worse." Their investigation began with the general store, the site of the first confrontation. Joseline carefully examined the wreckage, her fingers tracing splintered wood and overturned crates. She had an eye for detail, and her instincts told her that a clue was hidden in the chaos. Elias watched her, impressed by her focus, but also uneasy about what they might uncover. "Look here," Joseline said, pointing to a corner where the floorboards had been scratched and chipped. "Someone has been hiding something underneath these boards. Not a trap, but a hiding place." Elias crouched beside her, inspecting the marks. "Could be anything. Gold, papers, or something Lawson wants for leverage." Joseline knelt and pried at the boards with a small crowbar she carried. Beneath, she discovered a leather-bound journal, worn and dusty but intact. She opened it carefully, revealing pages filled with spidery handwriting, maps of the surrounding canyons, and notes about Dry Creek's past. This belonged to the town's founder," she murmured. "Secrets about the land, hidden gold, legal claims. It's all here." Elias leaned closer, scanning the pages. No wonder Lawson came after the town. He wasn't just after people, he was after wealth and power. "And he'll come back for this journal." Joseline's jaw set. "Then we protect it. At all costs." The day passed in a tense blur of activity. Joseline and Elias worked with the townspeople to fortify the buildings, set traps around the perimeter, and ensure that no one wandered into the canyon alone. Yet, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, the sense of unease returned. The wind shifted, carrying the faintest whispers from the surrounding cliffs, and the shadows grew longer, darker, as if the desert itself were watching. By late afternoon, Joseline and Elias had retreated to the saloon to strategize. The room was hot, the air thick with dust and the scent of sweat, but it offered a temporary reprieve from the relentless sun. "We need to find allies," Elias said, resting his forearms on the bar. Lawson won't stop with the Daniels gang. He'll bring more men, more firepower. Dry Creek can't hold him alone. Joseline nodded. There's a small settlement to the north Mesa Verde. My brother mentioned a man named Harris who runs it. Loyal, resourceful, and dangerous if crossed. If anyone can help us, it's him. Elias raised an eyebrow. Dangerous how? Joseline smiled faintly. The kind of man who doesn't ask questions twice. You don't want to meet him on the wrong side of his temper. By twilight, they mounted their horses and rode out toward Mesa Verde, leaving a few trusted townspeople to guard Dry Creek and the Journal. The ride was tense, the desert stretching endlessly around them. Dust rose in small clouds with each hoofbeat, and the sun's dying light painted the rocky landscape in shades of red and gold. Elias broke the silence first. You ever think about what happens if we fail? Joseline's gaze remained fixed on the horizon. I don't think about it. I don't have the luxury. If we fail, Dry Creek dies. Simple as that. He shook his head slightly, admiring her resolve but knowing the cost of such determination. You carry a heavy weight, Joseline. I know, she said softly, but it's mine to bear, just like you have yours. As night fell, they reached Mesa Verde. The settlement was smaller than Dry Creek but fortified with makeshift barricades and watchtowers built from timber and stone. A solitary figure waited at the entrance, a man tall and broad, with eyes that missed nothing. He introduced himself as Harris Cole, his voice gruff, yet carrying an undercurrent of respect when Joseline mentioned her brother. You're looking for Lawson, Harris said, his gaze sharp. I've heard rumors. Didn't think he'd strike so close to Dry Creek. He's after something, Joseline explained, handing him the journal. The town holds secrets Lawson wants. We need men's supplies, and a plan to stop him before he returns. Harris studied the journal, nodding slowly. This changes things. If Lawson gets his hands on this, he could control the territory. You've got guts, lady. I'll help, but we'll need more than courage. We'll need strategy, and we'll need to lure him into a trap. Elias stepped forward, his expression serious. We're running out of time. He'll come back with more than he had last night. And when he does, Dry Creek won't survive another frontal assault. Harris nodded, rubbing his chin. I've got a few men who owe me favors, some rifles, and enough dynamite to make the cliff shake. We can make this canyon a fortress if we set it right. But we'll need bait. And that's where you come in, Joseline. Joseline frowned. Bait? You lure Lawson and his gang into a place of our choosing, Harris explained. A canyon passage where we control every angle. It's risky. Someone will have to draw their attention. But if we play it right, we end them and protect Dry Creek. Joseline's stomach clenched, but she understood the stakes. Then we do it. We don't have another choice. Over the next several hours, they worked through the night, mapping the canyon, placing strategic traps, and organizing the men for the coming battle. Elias and Joseline moved seamlessly together, their trust in one another growing with every shared plan and whispered command. The tension between them was unspoken but palpable, a bond forged in danger, respect, and necessity. By the time the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the plan was set. Dry Creek would serve as the bait, the canyon as the killing ground, and Lawson would walk into their trap, believing he had the advantage. Joseline and Elias stood at the canyon's edge, watching the sun rise over the desert cliffs. The air was still, almost eerily so, as if the land itself were holding its breath. Ready? Elias asked quietly, his hand resting on the revolver at his hip. Joseline nodded, determination etched on her face. As I'll ever be. They rode back to Dry Creek, the journal secured, and the townspeople briefed on their roles. Every shadow seemed dangerous, every gust of wind a signal of impending violence. Joseline could feel the weight of every life in the town resting on her shoulders, and she accepted it without hesitation. As they neared the town, a lone figure appeared on the ridge. Lawson himself, mounted on a horse, surveying the landscape with cold calculation. His eyes locked on Joseline and Elias, a cruel smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Looks like the fun's just beginning," Elias muttered, gripping his reins. Joseline tightened her jaw. "Then we make sure they regret every step they've taken into Dry Creek." The stage was set. The trap was ready. And as the wind stirred the dust around them, carrying with it the scent of gunpowder and desert heat, Joseline and Elias knew that the coming confrontation would decide the fate of everyone in Dry Creek. This time, there would be no mercy. Only survival, justice, and the unyielding determination of those willing to fight for what was right. The first light of dawn cast a pale, almost ghostly glow over Red Rock Canyon. Dust hung in the air like a haze of memories, and the jagged cliffs stood as silent witnesses to the events that had begun weeks before. Joseline Mercer rode slowly along the canyon edge, eyes scanning every shadow, every ridge, every rock outcropping. Elias Kane followed close behind, his hand never straying far from his revolver. The town of Dry Creek lay ahead, quiet and tense. The survivors had taken refuge in the buildings they had fortified, each person knowing their role in the trap that had been meticulously prepared. The journal Joseline had uncovered documenting the town's hidden history, secret claims, and potential gold deposits was secured in a safe place. But the danger was far from over. Lawson and the Daniels gang were returning, and this time they came with everything they had. Joseline dismounted and surveyed the canyon passage they had chosen as the battlefield. The trap set the previous night gleamed faintly in the early light, carefully concealed pits, tripwires connected to powder kegs, and strategically placed obstacles to funnel the attackers into kill zones. Every element had been designed to give them an advantage, to turn the canyon's natural geometry into a weapon. Elias joined her, silent for a moment, then spoke. "They'll come down the main trail first. Standard tactic. Expect them to split up once they realize something's wrong." Joseline nodded. "Then we stick to the plan. We draw them in, pick them off, and protect the townspeople. This ends today." They mounted again, moving with deliberate calm toward the narrow entry of the canyon. Behind them, Harris Cole and his men waited in the shadows, poised and tense, ready to strike. Joseline's fingers brushed the journal strapped to her belt. It had been the reason this war had started, and it would remain the reason Lawson's greed would be his undoing. The first signs of movement came as a faint cloud of dust on the ridge. Joseline squinted. Figures emerged, too many to count at first glance, but the early morning haze made them easier to target. Lawson rode at the front, his dust-stained coat flapping in the wind, his cold gaze fixed on Joseline. Elias nudged her. "Remember, focus on control. Don't waste bullets. One shot at a time." Joseline inhaled, centering herself. The sound of hooves grew louder, the rhythm of approaching danger echoing against the canyon walls. As the gang reached the entrance, she fired the first shot, hitting a horse and forcing its rider to stumble. Chaos erupted. Men shouted, some scrambling for cover, others firing blindly into the rocks. From the high ledge above, Elias picked off two more attackers with swift, precise shots. The canyon amplified every sound: shouts, gunfire, the panic of men caught in a trap. Joseline moved like a shadow along the canyon wall, taking careful aim and retreating before the gang could respond. Lawson's voice rang out, cutting through the cacophony. "Find them. Kill them before they escape." Joseline's heart pounded, but she held her ground. She and Elias had trained for this, planned for every angle, anticipated every move. Yet nothing could entirely prepare them for the chaos of battle, the unpredictability of fear, greed, and desperation. The first of the gang attempted to flank from a side trail. Joseline fired, dropping the man before he could reach the townspeople hidden deeper in the canyon. Elias descended from his ledge to confront another, fists and rifle butt colliding with the attacker in a brutal, rapid struggle. Amid the fray, Joseline spotted a group of townspeople emerging from behind cover, carrying the wounded and dragging supplies. She signaled them back, moving swiftly to intercept any stray attackers. Every decision mattered. One mistake could cost lives. Then she saw him, Lawson, charging down the canyon toward her, knife in hand, rage in his eyes. Elias intercepted, colliding with Lawson with the force of a battering ram. The two men struggled, rolling across the dirt and rocks, each testing the other's strength and skill. Joseline took a deep breath, circling to a higher vantage point, revolver raised, waiting for the opening. Lawson slashed wildly, narrowly missing Elias. "Step aside, Mercer," he bellowed, rage contorting his face. "This isn't your fight." "It's my fight if it's mine to save," Joseline shouted back. She fired once, hitting Lawson in the shoulder. He roared in pain, staggering, giving Elias the advantage he needed. With a powerful move, Elias pinned Lawson to the ground, their fists striking and grappling in a deadly dance. Joseline moved closer, revolver trained steadily on Lawson. "It's over, Lawson. Surrender, or this canyon will be the end of you." For a brief, tense moment, the gang leader's eyes blazed with fury. Then, seeing the precision and strength of their defense, he froze. Some of his men were down, some fleeing, and the canyon funneled any chance of escape into Joseline's crosshairs. Finally, Lawson spat blood and cursed. "You haven't seen the last of me," he growled, his voice low and venomous. "This isn't finished." Elias tightened his grip. "It's finished now. You've lost." The remainder of the Daniels gang surrendered or fled. Joseline exhaled, allowing herself a brief moment of relief. The canyon was quiet once more, dust settling, the echoes of battle fading into the stillness. Harris Cole and his men emerged from their positions, helping to secure the captives and tending to the injured. "You two did well," Harris said, clapping Elias on the shoulder and nodding to Joseline. "Dry Creek owes you more than words." Joseline lowered her revolver, her arms trembling from the adrenaline and tension. "It wasn't just us," she said. "Everyone who stayed and fought played a part. Lawson underestimated people who care about something more than greed." Elias gave a faint, almost wry smile. "You've got a way of inspiring people, Joseline. Never thought I'd see it in action, but damn, it works." The townspeople began emerging fully, cheering, embracing one another, tending to the wounded. Relief mingled with exhaustion, and Joseline allowed herself to feel a rare sense of accomplishment. For the first time in weeks, Dry Creek felt safe, even if only temporarily. As the sun climbed higher, Joseline and Elias stood at the edge of the canyon, overlooking the town. The journal was safe, the secrets of Dry Creek protected for now, and the threat of Lawson had been repelled. Yet Joseline knew that true peace in the Old West was fleeting. Danger was never far, and the desert held more secrets than one town could ever guard. Elias turned to her, eyes serious. "You ever think about leaving?" Joseline raised an eyebrow. "Leaving?" He nodded. "After all this, surviving, fighting, planning, you could go anywhere. Start fresh." Joseline shook her head, a small smile on her lips. "This is my home now. Not the town itself, maybe, but the people. The fight. I've seen what happens when people turn their backs on what matters. I can't do that again." Elias studied her for a long moment, then nodded, a rare softness in his eyes. "Then I guess I'm stuck here with you," he said, with a hint of humor. "Not that I'm complaining." For the first time since the chaos began, Joseline allowed herself to relax. She knew the road ahead would be difficult. There would always be threats, always be challenges, but she also knew something vital. Together, she and Elias could face them. As the town began rebuilding, the sun climbed high over Red Rock Canyon, burning away the shadows of the previous days. Dust swirled in the warm air, carrying with it the promise of survival, hope, and the hard-won justice of those who refused to bow to greed and violence. Joseline Mercer walked through the streets, observing the townspeople, the children playing cautiously in the shade, the elders tending to minor repairs. The journal, the symbol of the town's secrets and resilience, was safe in her care. She had fulfilled her brother's last wishes, protected a town, and learned the value of trust, courage, and determination. Elias joined her, and for a long moment they simply watched the canyon stretch before them. The wind stirred their hair, carrying the scent of sagebrush and sun-baked stone. "Red Rock Canyon doesn't forgive easily," Elias said quietly. "No," Joseline agreed, her eyes reflecting both the rugged cliffs and the bright horizon. "But sometimes it rewards those who fight with honor." A new day had begun over Dry Creek. The threat of the Daniels gang had ended, the town's secrets were preserved, and the people could rebuild stronger than before. Joseline and Elias had survived not just by skill and courage, but by unwavering determination and the bond that had formed between them in the crucible of danger. The sun rose higher, casting golden light over the canyon and town alike. In that moment, Joseline felt a quiet certainty whatever the Old West threw at her next. She would face it head-on, not as a solitary wanderer, but as someone who had found trust, strength, and purpose in the most unlikely of alliances. Red Rock Canyon had witnessed the violence, the fear, and the bravery. And now, for the first time in what felt like forever, it could rest, and so could Joseline.